Hey everybody, welcome back to LaraChat Live. I think we're on episode number 16 here. We've got Eric Van Johnson, one of our newer regulars, and Matt Lance, one of the trusty old originals from when we started way back when in the old days. We also have Danny Bushkineth popping on, but he had some audio trouble. So once he pops back on, we'll introduce him. So today, what we wanted to talk about was with regard to hiring. How do you find the heroes from the zeros? And we all have some experience with hiring and being the hiree. So we wanted to kind of talk about some personal experiences with regard to how we, some tips that we can pass on for both sides of the table. And with regard to latest Laravel PHP news, web development news, Laravel 5.3.19 was released. You can read about it on laravel-news.com and also the Laravel website with their changelog. Welcome back, Danny.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, we're good now.
Yeah, okay, cool. All right, awesome.
We got our New York flavor tonight, Danny Bushkineth.
What's up, guys?
I was just talking about Laravel 5.3.19 had been released, and check it out on Laravel News. I saw a tweet by Taylor that looks like he started planning LaraCon. So LaraCon has been in the Kentucky, Louisville area, near his home, I think. I'm not 100% sure, but in that area for the last couple of years. I know Eric had a plea he wanted to make. Eric.
Yeah, so I'd been lobbying to Taylor for years about considering San Diego for a LaraCon, and I was ecstatic when he DM'd me on Twitter about a month ago saying, "Hey, we're trying to plan LaraCon 2017. And we're taking San Diego in consideration. Do you know of any venues?" I was trying to be all cool about it, like not telling any of my friends or anything that Taylor is talking about trying to do LaraCon in San Diego. Then he announced it on the Laravel podcast. So I tweeted back to him. I'm like, "All right, baby, full court press now. I'm gonna go out there and really try to get people to push for San Diego." But yeah, I know San Diego is one of the places he's considering. San Francisco was another, but I mean, San Francisco, come on, that's so cliche. Every tech thing does San Francisco. San Diego, baby, it's the end of October. It's 90 degrees outside right now. 90 degrees. Yeah, forget about it. You got to come to San Diego, Taylor. I forget there was a third place. I don't remember if he was still considering going to Kentucky or not, but it sounds like things are starting to click. He sent a tweet later in the week saying that things are coming together for LaraCon. I haven't heard anything else mentioned about San Diego, so I don't know. The last thing he spoke to me was cost was a little bit of an issue, but that's going to be an issue at any of the locations he was talking about. So I don't know. Hey, I'm just saying, if you're interested in coming to San Diego in 2017, you need to throw a tweet out there to Taylor, to Laravel, and tell them San Diego LaraCon 2017. Make it happen. We have beaches.
Maybe we'll start a hashtag through LaraChat and see if that can take off, because I know there would be an easy travel for me, an easy sell to my company, because we have an office down in Silicon Valley, San Francisco. So I could go down there and say, "Hey, look, we can send some people down to our main office and go to the conference." I don't know. I think it could happen. Plus, you're right. There's a lot of technical companies down there, and I can't see why not. Why a lot of them wouldn't want to sponsor. I mean, and I'm just assuming here. And I also wanted to point out, you said 90 degrees. So for any of our Canadian fans watching, that's what, 32 degrees Celsius?
I'm sorry, I'm talking English here. I forget you guys have your little conversion you do. Yeah, that's like 2 daisies and a tulip. I forget how you guys convert.
Well, in the true Canadian format, allow me to say I'm sorry.
But real quick, to get back on LaraCon, I have to tip my hat to Taylor. On the Laravel podcast, he did mention that one of the things he's taking into consideration when trying to plan the next LaraCon was the Laravel communities. He recognized the fact that San Diego's Laravel user group had a membership of over 200 people. San Francisco, he said, also was over 200. What he didn't take in consideration is we also have a PHP group out here. We have LA, which is less than 2 hours up north. We have Orange County. But it was good to see that Taylor was actually recognizing the impact of the community and kind of using that as one of the things he was factoring into where this conference should go. That was nice to hear.
One thing I think I want to do, I think I'll follow up with you offline to see if we can actually make some kind of Laravel San Diego hashtag go live, but also make t-shirt to go with it. And then see if some company would sponsor to give those away.
Baller, baby. You're going like all out. I thought I was going full court. You just like, yeah. But no, they have to be tank tops, right? I mean, it's San Diego, so.
I don't wear tank top for a reason. I am Canadian. I'm pretty white. I'm Irish. I'm probably just as white as your head there. So, one surprise is Alfred Newtiel is a little bit late. He said he sent me a message saying, "Hey, can I come on? I'm a bit late." And it's like, "Yeah, sure, come on." He's running down to his office right now, probably putting on some hair and cleaning up his, putting on some clothes and cleaning up his hair. So he should pop on in a few minutes and join us. I think he has a lot of good advice when it comes to hiring, as I've actually talked to him for information in hiring in my company here. So I'm really excited to have his feedback as well as you guys. You all have experiences on both sides of the table. So let's get into our first topic, and Alfred can catch up, I'm sure, pretty easily. So to go over what we have here on the panel, for me, I'm a senior lead developer at a company. I'm part of the recruiting team here. So if anybody in Vancouver is looking for a job, we are hiring. Get in touch with me on LaraChat. We have Danny, who is, correct me if I'm wrong, you're a lead developer at LawNet. You do hiring as well, correct?
Yeah, I'm a lead developer at lawline.com. And we also do hiring. I hired 2 of my last team members, and we'll see if we're going to hire some more. Right now, we're not currently hiring, but who knows, in the future we may hire, so like a junior or mid-level, which I think brings us into the topic of like, who do you always have to hire senior developers, or can you hire juniors, and kind of can you organically grow people? So I think there's a lot to definitely talk about.
And then we've got Eric, who is the CTO for a company, and correct me if I'm wrong again, you guys work on a contract basis and you hire contractors only, is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct, yeah. Yeah, our entire workforce right now are all contractors. We're contractors, and our workload is all contract work right now. We don't have a product we build ourselves yet, but we're working on a few things in the back rooms.
And then last but not least, we also have Matt Lance, who quit the rat race to start his own company. I'm not sure he's at the point of hiring yet. He's still a bit small, but he may one day. Let's all cross our fingers for him. Go, Matt.
There. Okay, there we go. I'm unmuted. Yeah. So the rat race. I'm still deep in that rat race. It doesn't end. It gets more intense when you go, indie, as it were. But we're always curious about different people to work with, and in the last few years of my career, I've been with different companies and usually doing hiring, or at least assisting with hiring and going through those processes. And I mean, I can't even count the amount of interviews I've done over the last 2 years even, but it's always a fascinating journey when you're getting to know new people and picking, quote unquote heroes from zeros and whatnot.
Then now we also have Alfred, who popped on a bit late. Alfred, before you came on, we were talking about you doing your hair and getting dressed. It looks like you just threw a hat on. Well, thank you for keeping up appearances and keeping our show top notch. We're so happy for that. So what we were just talking about between each person, like Danny, the lead developer, Eric's the CTO, Matt's the founder of a company, I'm a senior developer, and we all are on the hiring side of the table. We have been and are on the hiring side of the table. So for you are what?
Uh, I suffer all of it. We try to hire people. You try to train them. There's so many, things we go through on my end. I'm part of a team, so we're definitely doing a lot of hiring. So I've been out of the interview process for the past few months because we hired someone to help do that as well. So that's been good, but it is a hard process. It's really hard to weed these things out.
So I think some of the things that we'll talk about is I'll ask some questions and I'll get your guys' feedback from your experiences over the years. And I think one of the first things I think this one actually is probably widely contested at different companies, different personalities and so forth. But when it comes to tech tests, do you guys do online tests, written tests? Do you give them pieces of paper with code and tell them to decipher it? Do you ask them for code up front? How do you guys gauge the talent of the technical talent? Shout it out, first one to unmute wins.
Yeah, tough call. We've been debating a lot about that internally as we go through our hiring process. It's you kind of hear pros and cons on both sides of the fence with it. I don't know. It's anything past what's the really basic one that everybody does?
FizzBuzz?
FizzBuzz, yeah. Anything past FizzBuzz, and I don't know. You're kind of getting into a weird realm. It's like FizzBuzz is a good way of understanding if somebody has basic concepts and basic understanding, but it doesn't do a lot of deep testing. It doesn't really give you an idea if they have their heads around object-oriented programming or frameworks, and it's really difficult to do tests for that. And then you also have, I know I'm personally one of these guys. I don't test well at all. I test terribly. I don't know what it is. It's some mental block I have, but I don't know. I'll be interested to hear what everybody else has to say, because we've gone back and forth. We've thought about, we haven't done it and felt like we should have. We've done it and felt like it hasn't really been beneficial. So I'm kind of curious what everybody else says.
So, like, the way I look at it is there's kind of like two real approaches, in my opinion, to if you're going to test. And one is I have a specific role I'm looking for. I want to know that they have current experience at this particular, whether it's a stack or a type of technology, or it's just even something like a design practice that they just need to be able to seamlessly flow into. Then, like, yeah, you can give somebody a pointed test. But like me personally, what I normally do is the other route, which is I give a very simple test, very like low level, something like a FizzBuzz, in terms of where most developers, they've seen something like this before. It's not like I'm trying to trick them. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get a gauge of their code style and personality. Because at the end of the day, I'm sure their code will work, but the idea is I want to see the culture behind the code. Are they opinionated? Are they showing, like, how are they doing certain things? Like, because there's a lot of, debates in code and things like this, all these different kinds of things that, may make sense for each person. But for me, what's important is if I'm hiring somebody, I want to make sure that they care about the things that I care about, or even show me things that, I didn't necessarily care about, but I think, oh yeah, actually that is important, or that is interesting, or vice versa. If somebody shows just terrible like messiness or something, like, it's not really just the answer to the problem. It's like, what's the person behind the code? And I guess I best gauge it by, instead of having to personally interview every person, it's a great way to weed out people by saying, okay, these 10 applications were terrible. They all, just horrible spacing and just like terrible indentation. Those are great signs that, like, I'm not even looking for this person. Whereas other people who show, even if they may not get the answer fully right, I like to see like good things, like good, well thought out things. They're trying to present themselves in the best light possible.
I think one of the things you hit on there with culture, and that's one of the things that we try and do, is find that culture fit. And that's even hard because, like Eric mentioned, he doesn't interview well, but he's a strong coder. He might be the right cultural fit for your company, hypothetically speaking. But I find it hard to sometimes pick out that culture because some people do interview well. They're very charismatic. They can talk their way out of a phone book or whatever that thing is. But again, going back on to the original topic, one of the things that we do is we, again, have that simple quiz, a phone call in the beginning. We ask them simple PHP questions like require versus include. Do you know what that is? And I find that a lot of people who really understand PHP understand that, but the people who understand the frameworks don't, because they don't have to use that very much. And then some other questions are like, DB versus MySQL on the SQL side. Very basic questions, the things that you can kind of get a real sense of their technical understanding of the languages. And then when we do our in-person interviews, we have them written or printed copies of code, and we say, can you find the problem here? Can you explain what this code is doing? And sometimes it's not really your normal code. It's something that is a little bit different from what you would see on an online tutorial, and it may be good code, it may be bad code, but being able to explain and understand what's going on with the code is important, because sometimes we have to look at legacy apps and figure out what somebody at that time thought was a really great idea, or somebody at that time was really rushed and they crammed something together. So being able to read that code really gives us a good sense of where their technical skill sets lie. I've also in the past done technical tests where I will sit at a computer. This is me being hired a few years ago with other companies. I would do a test on a computer and somebody would be watching me type, like a screen share app of sorts. And I felt so much pressure, and I'm typing there and my hands are shaking and I'm making typos, and all I can think about is this guy is watching me and thinking, oh my God, this guy is an idiot. But I find it hard to agree with the the screen sharing apps because of the nervousness and the place it puts the developers in. I don't think it's a comfortable place for a lot of developers. But I'm curious about that specific question with regard to screen sharing type of test. Is it good or bad? What do you guys think?
All right, I'm gonna say a couple things because we kind of skipped over the last part, but I'm gonna jump around. So first off, the test that I've given out before, and this was all stemming from the test that I had to do to work at BlackBerry, and it was a clever test because it was more of a test of how can you handle something totally unexpected at that moment. And so what I often have given to interviewees is it's literally a page of HTML with some CSS and some JavaScript, really basic, and I tell them to draw it. And you have to read it, you have to understand and this is really basic stuff. It's like literally a button in the center of a screen. And if they even start writing the text, which is actually a really funny story about Batman fighting the Joker, and then it all turns out if you hit the button, it displays a different thing where it's like boom or something like that on screen. And it shows that you can understand the flow of what's happening between the actions, the results, and everything else. But it's more of it's so like simple, it should just be second nature at this point, right? It shouldn't be anything that catches you and says, oh, this is so confusing. And if you treat it that way, if you overreact to the whole thing, then it just goes wrong and you're going to draw it incorrectly. But if you can stay calm and collected, that shows me a lot about that person, because I can say, oh, well, I can trust them, when a database is crashing on a production server and, everything is going bananas, I know that I can rely on them to keep their composure and solve the problem, right? And then in terms of experience with being monitored, I don't know if I was actually being monitored during the interview, but there was one interview I went to where I was then put into a closed room by myself at a computer, full access to the internet, and I was told to write a whole app in like 3 hours with nothing but JavaScript. And I was like, And I'm, I'm pretty confident in myself. But at first up, Windows machine and giant like clunky keyboard, like back to the 90s. And I'm just like, okay, all right, Matt, you can do this. And it was like an hour and a half into my 3-hour time slot to write this thing. I was just like, there's no way this is going to get finished. Like, there's no possible way. And they're just like, would you like a glass of water? And it's like, I want a de-stressing mechanism right now because this is insane. But, and I don't think that's a good way to test anyone, period.
Yeah, I don't think I'd want to work for them. Yeah, I mean, the screen sharing is a good one. It's interesting. I think it depends on the personality type. I get intimidated or annoyed because, it can be hard to do screen sharing with people and work with them and just have your thoughts. And I like the comment too about some people do interview well. Interviews are hard because some people do it really, really well. And I've had those people be not good hires. So it's so tricky there as well. One other thing is noticing the small indentations and stuff. Yeah, it's a good one because that's the little bit of quality that the person is either A, not paying attention to, or B, they're drowning in the problem itself and they barely could do anything with that level of detail. So I think that's a good sign too of like where the person's at, even if they complete the task. One other thing is we hand out little projects to people, not JavaScript, build an app in a room by yourself on a Windows machine, but like just something simple, make a little API that gives some information, make an Angular widget, show it, nothing major, and then just review their code and ask them questions later. Maybe give them the day to do it and come back tomorrow. And lastly, well, two things. I kind of like the idea someone had before of like hire them for 2 weeks to do something and pay them for their time, but they might not have time and that's hard. And at night, you don't always have the energy or the drive. But I think that would be a nice way to get to know the person. But ironically, a lot of times it's just a gut feeling and it's hard to go with it. But I've seen that to be right more often than not with myself.
One thing there, when you're talking about the spacing, you have to be careful when you talk about those kind of things because you might trigger a space versus tab war.
Yeah, no, but we're talking messy. I've seen like just messy. Like they didn't even, they were in gedit or something, Notepad or something,
Yeah.
They had no help.
So I'm going to end this tab versus basis. We are not going to get into debate. Otherwise, we will go over our show timeline. Let's get back on track. I'm sorry I ever brought it up. Basis for the win.
I think one of the important things to remember in the interview process, especially if you're the person giving the interview, and one of the things I always try to make sure that I'm conscious of is that the person interviewing for the job is under a lot of stress. They're clearly considering making some changes in their life. This is how they make a living. This is how they get an income. There is way more pressure on them than on you at that moment. So by adding more pressure, by giving all these wacky tests of, can you code in the dark with a bunch of spiders on your back? It just seems like it might be overboard. But you're right. How do you make that connection? What, where does your gut kick in? And this is, I hate to get back up on my soapbox. I know I do it a lot. I've mentioned this in the past as well. This is where knowing your community really comes into play. And one of the fortunate things we've had with our company is that the people we've brought on board are people we have followed for years. We've literally watched their career, watched the projects they've worked on. We've talked about it in the past about how we treat it almost like recruiting, scouting for sports. And we kind of watch people and think, hey, have you seen Marcus? Have you seen the project he's working on? I saw some of his code. It looks pretty clean. We need to keep him in mind. And we've had the benefit of doing that. We haven't had somebody just come off the street that we didn't know anything about, had to go look on LinkedIn to see who they were, where they worked at. But I think community means a lot. And if you have a community around whatever platform you're looking to hire for, you're selling yourself short if you don't get involved with that community and see who is out there and who the all-stars are in your local area, because they bubble up really quick.
Yeah, I can actually attest to that. That one of the key selling points for myself for this current job was my involvement with LaraChat. And when I was doing the interview, I told them, "Oh yeah, next week is a PHP meetup in Vancouver, and I'm doing a talk there." And they all looked. I remember they looked at each other. Oh man, yeah, we need some of these guys who are involved and can get other people interested in the community. And I think that's a really important point where we have a strong community in LaraChat, and there's a strong PHP community. So there's absolutely no reason why we shouldn't be involved in our local meetup. There's a meetup section on LaraChat where people post up, the San Diego meetup, Bulgaria, I think was one of them recently, and they all get posted there. Just a little side footnote. If there's a meetup in your community, get involved, and if there's not, start it. But beyond that, one of the other questions I wanted to ask with regard to on the interview side is putting stress on the person who you're on the candidate. Now, for myself, one of the questions that I ask people in the interview is I basically I have my phone and I sit there and I say, okay, so let's say we are sending you to a meetup or a conference and you're going to talk about a specific topic that you care about, that you know about, and we're going to put you on the spot right here, and you have 1 minute to collect your thoughts, and then I want you to teach us about your topic. And this can be absolutely anything, or technical rather. Like it could be something that we already know. It could be something that we don't know. Like we stress that to approach it like you teach us something. And so I sit there with my phone and I have it and I say, okay, your minute starts, and they can think about it and process it. And then I say, okay, go. And it's time, and they have to react. They have to act. And the way I look at it, they kind of get put on the spot a little bit to be like, oh man, I know a lot about programming, but what's this one thing that I want to tell them that will impress them? And so we've had some people in the past where they just walk up and they're like, I can't do this. And it's not that we are looking for people that can go and do these conferences for us, but I think it was Alfred or Danny, I forget who mentioned it earlier, about having that person that you can trust, and that when the database crashes, that person is going to be there. They're going to be able to handle that stressful moment and be there in the trenches with you, doing whatever it takes and being able to communicate properly that the database server has gone down. This is how we need to fix it. This is what I know. What do you know? Kind of deal. And so we get some really interesting information coming back. Some of it we don't know. Some of it we do know. But I think it's a really good stress test. What are some stress tests that you guys do, if you may do any?
Well, I think you brought up a good point. Is first, even before the stress test, the whole idea of teaching, even for the minute, also it talks about communication. Like a big part of hiring to me is also you want to be able to have a person you rely on who can communicate to you a problem that they noticed, or communicate to a different team member or a stakeholder. Let's say you work for a company that's not just developers, right? You don't want to have to be the only person who can talk to them. You want to be able to have hybrid developers talk to business people if they need to, and should be able to communicate effectively. So I think there's definitely a lot of value in having something along those lines where, okay, teach me about something, even if it's something I already know, just show me that you have the aptitude, you understand what you're talking about, and you can actually think your thoughts through and tell them in a coherent manner, because they can talk well, and chances are, it's a good indication they can think out their code appropriately as well, So as far as that, stress tests, I've done the live coding. I've done that stuff. I'm not a big fan. I try and stay away from the whole stress thing. I know interviews are stressful in general, like Alfred said before. It all depends. What I like to do is, if I give a code test, I give them a chance to refactor. So I'll say, okay, here's the code test. They give it to me. I'm like, okay. The next day, I'm like, okay, here's the same code test. Here's all your code back. If you had to refactor this, because God knows there's always going to be improvement, room for improvement, especially on an interview where you're nervous. So just take an extra day, go through all your code, fix it up, and send it back to me. And that way I get a good sense of, okay, they've relaxed, they already understand the problem, they have more time to do it. Just like you said, you're all nervous when you had that live coding thing. Like, what would you have given for a second shot at that, knowing what you know after, right? Like, you would feel so much better, and you could really present yourself in a much better light. So I think it's a real fair opportunity.
I also like the I think Sean had mentioned it, that the idea of presenting them with broken code, taking the stress off them trying to conceptualize code and start from zero. Just give them broken code and say, this code is broken. How would you go about fixing this? Or what do you see? Can you look at this and tell me where things are going wrong? That sounds like a really good approach. I might consider using that.
So how much are you going to pay me? I didn't say it. But how much are you going to pay me to use that idea?
One question though is like, I've worked with developers who aren't good at communicating or social people or front-facing people. You wouldn't put them in front of the product owners, but they're great developers. They're great assets on the team. So I think, sometimes depending on your needs, you got to consider some space for that. And they've been amazing people on the team. So if I judge them on their shyness, it would have been a loss for sure.
I think that makes sense. I think at the end of the day, it definitely depends on your needs. Like, I guess I'm speaking from my perspective, which is a little bit of a smaller company. We all developers directly interface with the business people. Like, yeah, if you have a larger team, or where you have, let's say, lots of teams, right, where it's like a Condé Nast, where you have a team for this, a team for that, a team for this other product, and yeah, absolutely. If you can communicate to that developer effectively, where they may not, feel comfortable public speaking or whatever it is, and yeah, of course, there's room for those people. But again, like you said, it all depends on what exactly you're looking for.
One other thing is like, I guess like you just said, depending on the size and the needs, is like, I listened to this podcast one time, and it was an interview with a guy from Netflix, one of the developers there. And he just noted that they don't hire junior developers. They're all seniors. And I thought that was an interesting mindset. Like, okay, well, why, should we hire juniors? Should we only aim for seniors? Does anyone have any experience there, how they thought that through, and if they're doing one or the other?
Yeah, I had a note here to ask about juniors versus intermediate and seniors, and in the past, what we've looked for is that cultural fit, that technical fit, and I've actually hired some juniors that have turned out to be better than, over the course of time, to be better than the seniors. And now they're seniors and intermediate, and I would hire them any day of the week. So one of the risks I'm finding when you hire a senior is that personality. Is that person going to be able to come in and integrate as part of your team, or are they going to be so strict with what they've done in the past and companies they've worked at and how they do their process, that they're so strict that they can't get out of their box? And they can't mesh with your box, let's say, or they can't work with what you guys have already set up as a process. And I think that's really risky when you have seniors. But I guess when you have a larger company like Netflix or Electronic Arts, or those bigger companies, they've already got the processes in place. So I'm actually not sure how well they integrate with it, but my biggest fear with seniors has to be with fitting into our culture box and our technical box, and everything else around it.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, I agree with Sean with everything he said, as far as I've seen juniors do far better than certain seniors, and obviously vice versa. But to me, it all comes down to the single idea of the propensity to learn, right? At the end of the day, a developer's job is to learn. You're not going to have all the answers. You got to be able to sit there, assess what you, when you have a bug, you don't know what the problem is. You have to sit there and you have to learn what the problem is, right? If you're using a new technology constantly changing with JavaScript frameworks, switching hands every 3 days, there's so many things to constantly learn. And certain senior developers are very good at keeping up and learning, but other ones get very comfortable in what they're used to and want to stick to the few things that they learned when they were eager to learn. Whereas juniors, some are eager to learn, some are just juniors and just phase out. So it all depends. I definitely wouldn't limit out one. There's pros and cons to it. You can home grow somebody and teach them good habits from the beginning versus somebody could have bad habits. They're a senior. Like there's a lot of benefits to both. I if it was like if I'm growing a team, then I would start by hiring a few senior people to help architect a vision, and then once I have, let's say, like a smaller, decent sized team, I can maybe hire a junior or two to help spread some of the love, and then in turn teach them, grow them, because we were all juniors at one point. If nobody ever hires a junior developer, then the whole profession dies.
I think you nailed it. And I mean, there's some different aspects to consider as well. If you're a company, you're an established company that you have your own product, you're out of your mind for not bringing junior developers. I mean, a junior developer to some people is just, I mean, one person's junior developer could be a more advanced developer in another shop. Who knows? But if you own a company, to bring somebody in and mature them organically within your culture, your code base, that's the way to do it. Now, on the flip side of that, again, our company, all contractors, all of our work is contract work. Companies that hire through us or hire us, they don't particularly want to pay people to learn. Like, they're looking for people to come in with solutions. It really takes a special type of developer to be able to walk into these situations and just kick out solutions. So we've debated and sort of have tried to hire some junior developers, but it's a rough environment, the consulting field, that is. And it's not really conducive to learning and growing. That's where I really think established companies come into play. So, yeah, again, if you have a company, you're hiring, look, that's where the talent is. The talent are the young people who are coming up. Look for them. Look who's participating in the community, and bring them on board and start to get them into your culture.
Yeah, I mean, like,
Go ahead, Matt.
I was gonna say, my business partner and I have we've talked about this numerous times over the past several months about, do you hire junior devs and bring them up to where we want to bring them up, or do you hire on senior devs and stuff like that? And a lot of times, I mean, in my own personal experience, I mean, I've flip-flopped companies so many times just because, as a developer who wants to continuously grow, the minute I feel restrictions, I'm less inclined to just chill and go with the slow flow. I'll want to jump on new things and grow faster. And so there's a fear in the sense of, if you bring on senior devs, how long are you actually going to keep them on board, right? I mean, like, if they're skilled and they've got a good amount of experience and they want to keep growing, but your business can only give them so much new stuff, per month or day or year, you're building that risk of losing them, right? And when you're investing so much money in them as a cost, I mean, that's hard to try to balance out. Whereas like your junior devs, you have a higher probability they're going to stay with you for maybe a year or two, like maybe 2 years. But then even them, I mean, if they're really skillful and they want to keep growing and move forward, you run that risk again, right? So I feel like there's a lot more balance into maintaining those investments, as it were, rather than I mean, I don't know. I'm all for hiring junior devs. I'm all for hiring senior devs. My biggest concern is passion. I mean, like, if I look on their GitHub and I see they've never committed one thing on anything ever, then I'm like, okay, well, why? I mean, like, if they're new to Git, well, that's weird, but whatever. And but I want to see something. I want to see that they've done 6 projects outside of day-to-day work, because they're so in love with what they do that they can't stop themselves from continuing forward, right? That's the sort of stuff I like to look for.
It's an interesting thought you said about the Git there. I'd have to look at my profile. I don't think my GitHub profile very filled out. I have a bunch of private projects that I'm a part of, but I have my private repos over on GitLab. And this is not an paid advertisement, but I mean, it's free at GitLab, so I'm over there. I've done a couple open source projects, but it's been very minimal. But what I wanted to do with that, go ahead, Matt.
It's a good point, by the way, with GitHub. I like the idea, but you're right. A lot of people, it's private stuff. So,
and Matt, you had a point?
I was just gonna say, it's not necessarily, you know, specifically a GitHub thing. I mean, any sort of projects that they've been doing outside of stuff, or any. I mean, like on their resume alone, it should state that they've, in all likeliness, they've done several personal projects or whatever, or you know, they're involved with this community or that community, or you know, they were just anything. It's seeing that drive to do more than what they're obligated to do to fulfill their paycheck duties. That's kind of what I'm indicating.
That makes perfect sense now. The other thing I wanted to talk about was there was a junior in my past experience, a junior fellow. I think, I can't even remember if he had a job, but I remember sitting at my desk working at my computer and look over, there's a knock on the door. We had glass doors, and there's this you know, young fellow straight out of college there with paper in his hand. I'm like, hi, who are you? What can we do for you? He's like, you know, he's a little nervous. Like, yeah, I saw you guys online, and I like what you're doing. I just wanted to, you know, walk by and drop off my resume and say hi to you guys and introduce myself. And like, we were so impressed by that like, we knew he was a junior. We knew that he didn't have a lot of experience, but we were just so impressed by that drive to seek us out that we ended up hiring him. Of course, we vetted him properly, and it all worked out. But we were so impressed. Like, that was one thing that sticks out in my mind, that if I was a junior again, I would, you know, and it takes a lot of guts to, you know, walk into a company and say, hey, here's my resume. You don't know me, but I know you. But that really impressed me. So I think I'm curious if you guys, if somebody walked into your office, or, you know, cold called or even cold emailed, that, hey, I've looked you guys up. I've seen you, you know, Eric, I've seen you at the San Diego conference, like, or meetup. And like, would you hire them? Would you want to hire them more than if you just received their email or resume in normal circumstances?
Well, I think you know my answer is going to be yeah. Especially if I see you at LaraCon San Diego 2017. Let's do this! No. But yeah, community is huge. It's definitely gets you on my radar when looking for talent. There's no question.
Just so you know, we've already started. I've already started the hashtag on our LaraChat Slack Twitter account. Hopefully, it's the right hashtag and it takes off, but it's there for now.
You have been retweeted several times, my friend.
Yes, so we'll get 2 retweets.
So I had a question for everyone. This is another topic that we've discussed internally, and now that Laravel has decided has a certification program that they're starting to structure. There are other certification programs out there. Symfony has one. Zen has one. Just curious what everybody's thought is on people that do these certification programs. Do you put any more weight behind their resume, or is it just a way of them telling you, yeah, I'm good at taking tests, so let's move on?
For me, the big thing about doing a certification is that they've taken the time to invest in themselves on a learning process. Whether or not I care specifically about which certification or what level of that certification, learning that they want to go and seek out further information and grow their own skill levels, that's really cool to me. I mean, like I've met devs who have all sorts of Zen certifications and stuff, and then I've seen their code, and I'm like, what on earth? And I mean, so I mean, like, there's no guarantee that a certification means they're going to be a skilled developer. It just means that, you know, they can take tests. But I think there's a lot of, I think there is weight to be given when you think about it in the sense of they've invested extra time and energy into their own career and their own future.
So I kind of both agree and disagree with you, Matt. And like I love what you said about how, like, you know, the idea is I don't really care which cert they have, and like I do understand there is, you know, merit to doing certifications, but like I've also seen tons of these, like, you know, developers will have these Zen certifications and their code is definitely crappy, and it's not, you know, I'm not on Zen or whatever it is. It's more just there's people who get these certifications to make themselves look better, and they hop job to job 6 months, 1 year because they get found out. You know what I mean? Like they work, they have these certifications, resume looks great. I think Eric alluded to before, there's people who are, you know, good at interviewing, and they, you know, have all these, you know, stripes in their chest, quote unquote. And once they get there, you realize they don't really know it. So to me, the certifications, although like in theory, like it sounds good they're doing it, but it could just be a business person who just wants to have a shot at being a developer, and they, you know, do these certifications, whether it's an AWS cert or, you know, a Laravel cert. They have these things, say, hey, you know, I know these things. Let me get a job as a, you know, like hybrid, you know, dev business operations person or something, you know?
So that brings up my next thought process, which was what actually spooks me the most is when I see that they've got like a dozen certifications. See, if you've got one or two, okay, cool. You wanted to learn a bit more about one thing or specialize to a degree. But when you've got like 12, let's say, as a random number, certifications in a variety of different things, that's like a massive red flag to me. It's like, okay, so you can't even make up your mind on what you're doing. You're really just trying to pump your resume full of some credentials. And at the same time, like, I'm also not a big person on, you know, what school you went to and stuff like that. Like I didn't go to school I went to 1 month of college and then 1 semester of university, and I had nothing to do with computer science. And so, I mean, you know, I've met tons of devs who can sweep the floor of guys who went to school for everything under the sun. But then I've also met, you know, flip side. So yeah, it's interesting.
That brings up an interesting thought. My next question, specialist or generalist, what would you hire?
Me specifically?
Anybody.
I would go with it all depends on the situation in the end. I mean, like, you can't really get around that. I mean, obviously in a general sense, go for a generalist. But then again, maybe you, as a small company, you want to start gearing yourself in one direction, or perhaps you want to bring in a specialist to teach your more generalist group. So I mean, it kind of depends, I think, on the grander direction of things at that time. I don't know if it can be summarized on the fly like that.
Any of the other guys?
Yeah, I think it's size of the team. I mean, like, if you're one person growing a team, like, you're getting 1 or 2 more developers, then like chances are you need a generalist, because like even with servers, redundancy is key, right? Like, you want to be able to take a vacation and have somebody else help out. You don't want just having one other person, a specialist who says, hey, I don't know any about any of that stuff. I can't do any of that. I can only do this thing, and I can make it, you know, hum like a bird. But with me, so like if you have a larger team where you have, let's say, 5, 6, 7 developers, you can start to then hire, you know, a specialist. Is okay, you know, I'm excellent at, you know, I spent, you know, 2 years doing video, like all about optimizing, you know, video streaming online. You have a video product, you know, then it makes sense, you know, to hire specialists who can really improve your stuff, because you already have redundancy cover and you have now room to improve, and you can start breaking people up into teams, and it makes sense. If you have just one big team, then, or one team of people working on one thing, then yeah, generalist helps. If you have the ability to break up into little teams, then it's nice to break up into, you have, you know, you have an iOS team, you have an Android team, you have a you know, web team, or whatever it is, however you decide to break up your company. But the idea is, if you have developers, it's nice to have generalists in the beginning and then break out into specialists.
Yeah, I would probably echo a lot of what Danny just said. Team size is key. And so much of our technology is blending with JavaScript, front end, back end, frameworks.
Yeah.
And then you move over to DevOps and full stack of web servers, database servers. If you have people that can specialize in those particular fields and your team is big enough and you can afford it, fantastic, because it just makes those areas stronger. But again, if you have smaller teams, yeah, you kind of have to go the generalist route.
Okay. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice. One of the other questions I wanted to put out there with regard to, let's say, generally speaking, lying on resumes. And I know, I remember back in high school and the college days, and maybe they were really bad counselors, but telling me to fluff up my resume, make it look like I'm bigger than I am, better than I am. And I think that's a horrible idea, because you're going to get called out pretty quickly. And we have called out some people in interviews in the past. And it's really disheartening when you look at the resume, the person looks great, you bring them in and you say, so tell me about such and such. And yeah, I didn't really do much of that. So how do you guys feel about when someone kind of fluffs up their resume like that?
My biggest fear about people who don't necessarily fluff up their resume, but fluff up their skills in an interview process is, well, let's use this is an example for you, right? Okay, I said that I was fascinated by big data and the systems involved in big data and how you can, do analysis on it and things like that. And I had tinkered with a few of the packages out there and played with some of the Python code. And I've got a few books on, machine learning stuff. And that was what I expressed in an interview once. And I never said that I had written anything vast and complex with it. I just said I was interested in it. I wanted to do more with it. That turned into me being the big data guy in a company. And they're like, oh my God, we have to do all this stuff with big data. And you know what? Just get Matt. He knows how to do it all. And then I'm like, okay, I'll figure it out. Maybe, I don't know. Let's try. And so, you got to kind of play that really carefully in what you say you are really into and what they think that means. There can be some real communication issues there. But no, I'm also, in a general sense, there's no point in fluffing a resume. If you know it, you know it. If you don't, be honest and say you want to learn it, because I'm more interested in you wanting to learn than saying you know something you don't.
Let me add to that. In an interview that I took, I think a couple years ago now, and I knew better in the interview, and somebody asked me a question. I'm like, I think it does this and this, and then blah, 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 blah. And I was pulling it out of my head. I didn't know the answer, and I was saying, I think this is what it does. I ended up making myself look way worse than I would have been if I just said, I don't know, I'm interested in it. So, for anybody who is in an interview and they don't know something, just say you don't know. Like Matt said, I don't know, I want to know. Don't try and pull it out of your head if you don't know. You'll get exposed so fast.
Yeah, I agree. And not to date myself, but when I was graduating high school and going through college, doing a resume and fluffing it up a little bit, yeah, it was such a common practice. But nowadays, I can't tell you the last resume I've looked at. Yeah. You can give me your resume. I'm checking you out on LinkedIn. I'm checking you out on Twitter. I'm checking you out on Facebook. So yeah,
well,
it's
back in high school, you were typing it out on paper and mailing it.
That's right. Yeah, and then you'd have to go down there to the copy machine and make multiple copies of it. I know. See, I was ahead of my time. I actually put a little emblem on mine before I took the copy, so it all looked like it was done on a computer.
Yeah.
But I kind of agree with what Eric said. It's almost like, especially not in development, it's almost common practice to just have a fluffed up fancy words, optimizing and enhancing and synergizing and all those like buzzwords people love to throw in their resume. Like I didn't go to school for I didn't go to college for computers or development or anything like that. I went to school for economics. I wanted to be a finance guy in the beginning, right? So for me, like that was the ticket, right? You don't have that much experience. No finance guy's going to hire you unless you have all these fancy buzzwords trying to make yourself seem way more understanding. Development, it's a lot more of a meritocracy. It's a lot more where the resume means a little bit less, and it really means show me some things you've done. Show me your portfolio. Like really, to me, the portfolio means a lot more than the resume. Like Matt said earlier, the GitHub's a great way to look. I do understand a lot of stuff is private, so if you don't have it, you don't have it. But it's very helpful to see something, code samples. Just show me you're interested. It's all about the passion, not about the resume.
So we're getting close to the end of our show. So one of the things I want to do, open it up to our questions. We've got a couple of questions here. So this is more on the other side of the table where someone in our Eduardo in our LaraChat Slack asked, how would you know if the employer is good for you?
Again, research. I can't stress that enough. You're making a pretty big commitment, and you're literally changing your life to work for a company. So it behooves you to do some research. There are sites out there now. I think one of them is called Glassdoor or something, where people can go in and review companies, review what it was like to work there. You've got to do that now. I mean, the resources are so readily available to you. You just do your research.
And don't lie to yourself. If you don't like it, you're not going to like it. You're not going to grow to like it. You're going to grow to hate it more. And then they're going to kick you out and hate you. It just never works.
That's perfect, Alfred. I mean, don't go to work somewhere because you want to work for company X because they have this name. You got to make sure it's a fit for you for sure.
Yeah, totally.
I think one of the things that's really important is go with your gut as well. I've been in some interviews before, and there's just something that didn't fit right. And a couple times I listened to my gut, and there have been times I haven't. And I went to work for the company, and after the first week, I was like, no, this is not for me. This is not where I want to be. This is not what they sold me on. My gut knew, but my brain wanted the money. But yeah, listen to your gut. I think it sometimes tells you more than the brain does.
I need to make an app for that. My gut's telling me this. My brain's telling me that.
I have never had, in my experience, I've never had that initial gut reaction of this is not a good fit. I've always thought this could be cool. There's a lot of interesting things going on, but I think within a good, this is the way I try and think about it, right? Like, we have the probationary process with most companies, right? You have 3 months, and then the company's going to decide whether or not they keep you on full time, blah, blah, blah. I think that's just as much your time to test the company as it is the company's time to test you. And I think within that 3 months, you'll have a good perspective on a company and whether or not, long term it's going to fit your style and what you want to do, moving forward. And I've worked with a lot of companies that were in transition of different things, and sometimes it's really hard to gauge a company when they're in a big transitional phase and they're trying to grow more, but then things aren't necessarily working in their favor to do that and stuff. So it is tough, but I mean, I don't know. I just think the biggest thing is that 3 months, that is a two-way street. That's not, should never live in fear of like, oh, am I meeting their standards? Are they meeting your standards? Is a equally valid question.
Totally agree, man. I think you hit nail on the head. It really is, even the interview is you're interviewing them, right? And like, if I had to give a tip, it's take a tour. If they'll give you a tour of the office, look around developers. Are they happy? Are they sad, right? How's the lighting in the office? Is it like a dark dungeon or is it like a nice office? Because all that stuff matters. And like if you see people are generally happy, if it doesn't seem like people are overworked, then those are all good signs. If you see it's like a like a sweatshop, and those are good reasons to maybe not take the job.
So let's go over to the second and last question so we can wrap up for the night. How do you deal with people that you don't want working for you any longer?
Band-Aid. In my opinion, it's like a Band-Aid. I think you give them opportunities to, like you communicate in the beginning. You first say, okay, things, because it's not going to be all of a sudden somebody's not working out, right? It's going to be a few things, start to show some red flags, there's some disagreements or whatever, and then just slowly but surely a person just isn't working out, right? If it gets to that point, if you communicated with them, you try to level with them, you try to give them multiple opportunities to, make it fit better. And if it just doesn't, to me, it sounds way more terrible than it is, but like Band-Aid, you just have to say, you know what, like this isn't working out and it doesn't serve either of us to continue this relationship, So
you mean Band-Aid in the sense of just ripping it off?
Yes, exactly what I mean, like ripping off the Band-Aid. Like you don't do it piece by piece, you just tear the whole thing off.
Yeah. It's a tough one for me to this day, because like you said, when somebody isn't working out, then something about that process failed. Whether it's communication, whether it's expectation, something failed, and I'm sure it's failed on both parts. So identifying that is helpful to you as a company so that you can prevent it from happening again. But yeah, rolling people off, I mean, it's different in every situation. If they're an employee, depending on the state they're on, there's certain rules you have to follow. Again, being a contractor, working in the contracting field, is pretty simple. You just let them know that we don't have any more work for you at this time. So
it is hard, though. It does make you wonder, what could you have done better? That's the only thing that bugs me. Not the only thing, but that's one of the bigger things, is like, how can I do it better next time? What did I miss?
Yeah, I think a retrospective, not just in, if you had to let someone go, but it's also important to have a retrospective, I think, on the hiring process too, when it comes to what did we do well, and asking these people these questions. What could we have found out more about? Sometimes I've come out of some interview thinking, man, I wish I could have found a question to cover X, Y, Z, and I wish I did. But it's good to have that retrospective, I guess, all over the place. So we're 5 minutes over our time, and I set the time to be a little bit longer. Last show, we ended up getting booted off, I think, in the middle of talking, so technical difficulties there. It was a little unfortunate. So today, we are going to end somewhat on a good note. Thank you, Alfred, Danny, Eric, and Matt, and I guess thank you myself. I'm so proud of myself. But we've had another good show, and we will do another LaraChat Live in 2 weeks. We'll come up with some topics and hope to see you guys there. Thank you so much, guys.
Thanks. Great talking to you all.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Great stuff.